Have you ever wondered how successful architecture, engineering, and construction companies scale their business?
Or have you ever wanted guidance on how to get more growth, wealth, and freedom from your AEC company?
Well, then you are in luck. Hi, I'm Will Forat.
And I'm Justin Nagel, and we're your podcast hosts.
We interview successful AEC business leaders to learn how they use people, process, and technology to scale their businesses.
So sit back and get ready to learn from the industry's best. This is
Building Scale. Hey listeners, it's Will here. Our mission is to help the AEC industry protect itself by making technology easy. If you've ever listened to our show, then you know that the three pillars of scaling a business are people, process, and technology. So if you suspect technology is your weak link, then book a call with us to see where we can help maximize your company's IT and cybersecurity strategy. Just go to buildingscale.net/help.
Today's guest is Jimmy Akintonde, founder of Ujamaa Construction. Jimmy founded Ujamaa in 2002. His vision was to create a company that would provide exceptional construction services in a socially responsible manner to rebuild our community one block at a time. Ujamaa has grown dramatically under his leadership, and is known as a premier diversity general contractor and construction management firm in the city of Chicago. As one of the largest diversity contractors in the Midwest, their presence has grown not only in the Midwest, but also in the Southeast, where they have capacity to execute on any project. And one thing, as I was going through all of the, hey, look at all greatness about Ujamaa, the quote that you have, Jimmy, when I founded Ujamaa in 2002, I wanted to build an organization that paid an equal amount of attention to social responsibility, profitability, and citizenship. That just hit right. That was just it there. So I don't know if you wrote it, you had somebody write it for you, but that's perfect in my eyes. With all that said, Jimmy, welcome to the show.
Justin, thank you so much. I very appreciate it. You know what? That quote is 23 years ago. I came up with it. Sometimes, what is it? Even once in a while, the roadrunner catches the coyote. And by no chance, a wordsmith or any of that, but once in a while, I stumble on the right ones.
It's perfect. So 23 years strong, it still lives up. So that's awesome. So I said some nice things, but tell us your origin story. Tell us how you got into construction. Tell us why Ujamaa is so great, what the vision you had for it 23 years ago, as well as the vision you have for it now.
You know, it's funny. And I guess in 23 years, right? So I've been in the industry 30 years now plus. In 23 years, it's a change in evolution in terms of how I think or what I think is important, or at least what I think I'm doing, which is really interesting because you know, it sounded like 23 years ago I had this vision, and that's the only way, that's the only path forward. I had some ideas, and I still have some ideas. And somewhere between all those ideas, something's happening, and we'll see how that goes. I think intentionally, the intent was to build a construction company that paid attention to the community. And one of my early projects was I used to do projects for neighborhood housing services. And we were going into the inner city, west side, south side. And these, underprivileged will get grants for renovations for kitchens and bathrooms. And you have to imagine these are folks who couldn't afford it. And so neighborhood housing administered this grant program, and they'll bring contractors in. And there'll be 3, 4, let's call them diverse contractors, because that's what it is on the other side. And you walked into houses that weren't like the houses you and I are probably used to. The kitchens need work. Some cases there's a bucket in the bathroom collecting the water, and they're dumping water from the sink into the bathrooms. And you can see the faces in the contractors, right? They know, we're here to do a job, but to imagine people are living like this, and the social, standards that people have to live to. And obviously, right, we're in the greatest place in the world, and people are still living this way. It's not fair. But I'll walk in, and I saw that as an opportunity to improve and really affect somebody's life. But what will always happen is, right, it's always after work or after hours, or so you're there, and they'll be cooking, and you start smelling, greens and and fried chicken, and I'll just light up. So you'll see someone who's not used to people paying attention or appreciating them, just look at me and I'm going, wow, whatever you're cooking, it just sounds so great. And the joy that they feel being able to offer you a plate, and you're just as equally excited to receive a plate. It's not like I can't go eat, right? But that it's this hospitality and this generosity giving you, the very little that they had, and you're able to receive it and welcome it. And boy, if you look at my early pictures, I did put those weight on. Some of but I really enjoyed that experience. And when you finish something like that, and the homeowner account comes through, and right, they see the work that you've done, they see the pride. You see the pride in their faces. This is how they live now, right? You've really changed the way they live. They will literally wake up in the morning and feel very different from that day, right? And it's something that you did. So it's one of the reasons why I really felt like when I started the organization is to do projects like that have those impact. Uh, Over the years, right, 23 years, I started noticing a different impact about 10 years ago, and it's with the employees. When you brought somebody in, a young kid in, and fresh out of college, really concerned about their future, not quite sure what direction they want to go, and you look at them and you make them feel special, and you make them feel appreciated, make them feel seen, and you see them grow right in front of you. You see them move out of their parents' house and get their own apartments, and they start dating, they get married, they have kids, and you see that sense of they wake up every morning, you talk to them, and you realize that this person literally grew up in front of me, and you created that opportunity, that help them feel that complete person, right? That complete human. And you can only think about the extended family around that person that you were part of. So it's really cool to see, and recognizing that work, especially for what we do, providing a decent, comfortable way for someone to live, and you see how it affects the way they live and how it affects the world around you. And it's a really interesting way of seeing things. I've really learned to enjoy that, and I enjoy that more now than I've ever done.
That's I don't know if it's early here in Arizona. I don't know what it is. I got a little swell up here. I don't know. That was that something about that story or the stories just hit me. I knew I knew that you were impactful. I knew that was the driving force, and that story kind of just cultivates it. So thank you for sharing that. That's super awesome.
So you had to start from your attic just as one employee, right? So, and that transition, right, as you've had really as a leader, you've had multiple transitions reflecting back. So what were some of the unexpected struggles you encountered as your company began to grow, and how did the challenges sort of evolve over the years?
There's one memory that I've told this story a couple of times, and it resonates more with entrepreneurs, right, who've walked that line, especially in my prior experience. I worked for a large general contractor. And this is back when, before you had Keurig. So you had the big pot steak coffee pots. And it's always the same thing that, in a big office, eventually somebody gets up and you make a fresh cup of coffee and you can all smell it. And as soon as that thing hits click, there's this beeline right around, because everybody wants a fresh cup. And really, if you're the one making it, you got to stand by the pot to make sure you get a fresh pot, because nobody wants to make it. And, this is, folks these days won't understand that, because, right, Keurig just gives you a fresh pot all the time, right? But it wasn't always the same. If you got there late, you're drinking a stale, gross coffee. And so that was my experience, right now, my previous experience. And I remembered, right, the idea, right, the romantic idea of, I'm going out on my own. I'm going to make this work. And I got an office, and I'll tell that story differently. I got my office, and rent down the Staples on 87th Street, and I got my first small cup of coffee. I think it held about 8 cups. It's a white little coffee pot, And I remembered I went back in I'm in the office and my first real day, and I made a fresh cup of coffee, and as it finished, I stared at it because I realized I have to drink all 8 cups myself.
You have to.
Was the reality check right there. That's when you kind of go, oh, what was I thinking?
So as your company's expanded, you're having to hire new generation of workers, and the thinking is different with each generation. So how have you had to adapt your leadership to engage and motivate new generations, new generation of workers, especially because of the different expectations, right? Gen X versus millennial versus Gen Z, all of them are very different. So how's your style and engagement had to change with each of them?
The business itself has changed from when I started. I mean, so I am the pre-internet generation. And so the way we ran work back then was you were on a trailer, you had a project manager, you got a project superintendent, you're the engineer, and they usually have a admin person on staff because you wrote all checks, you wrote all contracts, you literally managed everything off the trailer. And thank God to fax machines. Everything was done on a fax machine.
By the way, I haven't heard "thank God for fax machines" maybe ever in my life. I want to be clear about that, Jimmy.
I mean, if you had a fax machine on a job site, you were top notch. I mean, it's the ability to send something right away, and it's only black and white. So whoever gets it, there is no color picture. There was no color fax machines. They were all black and white. But you got that information over right away, and somebody saw it. And boy, you were amazing.
But let's be clear here. When we talk about right away, there's a different standard of today right away and fax machine right away, right? And what sounds like the murdering of robots when it gets sent out, right? So, and it's the right away is really like 5 minutes, right? And hoping that the paper doesn't jam.
Yeah, before fax machine, right away was you literally driving there, right? I mean, the fastest way you can get to an architect or get information to an architect, the fastest way you can get information to a contractor was you literally drove there. So you drove there to pick up the submittals, you drove there to drop off the submittals. I mean, you literally drove there or you waited until they showed up. So now you can get information to an architect in 5 minutes. Oh my God. Are you kidding me? I mean, so that's how the business started. And now that information is instant. I mean, here we are, having this great conversation, and we're literally in the same room, and we're still, spread across all over the place. And I think that and I think it was right. You have to adapt because today's workforce and today's people respond very, very differently. Back then, I remember my very first job. I walked into a trailer, and I was building a maximum prison in Virginia, and I'm coming out of Chicago. I think I'm the biggest, toughest stuff in the world, right? I am just as bad as they get, and I'm down in Sussex, Virginia, in the middle of nowhere, south of Richmond, and I walked up to the project executive, and I says, I'm here from Chicago to build this job because I'm that important. What would you like me to do, sir? And he says, well, you go across that, the parking lot to that trailer over there, ask for a man named Howard Goodwin, and he'll tell you what you're doing. So I said, okay, no problem. So I got out, I walked over to Howard, and I got there and I said, hey, I'm the engineer out of Chicago, right? I'm still throwing to Chicago because we're big city Chicago. Right, I'm an engineer out of Chicago. Let's not forget that. What would you like me to do for you, sir? Right, I told I should report to you, and he nodded his head and he pointed to the coffee machine, and all my stories can always come back to the coffee machine. That's no way. And he pointed to the coffee machine and he goes, you see that coffee pot? I go, yeah. He goes, I get here around 6 o'clock. He goes, you think you can have a fresh pot of coffee when I get in? He goes, if you can handle that, we're good. And he walked out. And I remember sitting there going, I'm the young engineer out of Chicago, for crying out loud, right? But next day he showed up. I had a fresh cup of coffee for him, a fresh pot, and he gave him my walkie-talkie. We used walkie-talkie back then, not phones. Give me my walkie-talkie and put me in the, it says, get in the truck, and it took me out in the job site, right in the field. And that's how my career started. You try that now, you get a lawsuit.
When you write your book, it should be Tales of Coffee and Construction. And it could just be all the stages of you scaling your career and then your business in coffee analogies. So that would be wonderful.
That's something to do with coffee. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But you can't do that today, right? You have to. Today's generation recognize that they went through college, they out of college, they got very educated because they were exposed to so much more than I know I was, right? Back when I went through this, we used to use the graphic standards because there was no Home Depot. So when you wanted to go see what a 2x4 looked like, if your family didn't come out of construction and you saw it, you literally had to go grab the Suites catalog at the library to go say, what does an expansion joint look like? But today you got a YouTube video. Not only will it show you what an expansion joint look like, it'll show you how to install it. And you can become an expert in anything you want by the time you get out of college. And so how do we engage that generation, and how do we make them feel part of something that's greater than the individual? And I think it's by listening, it's by being patient. When we have high school interns from Chicago public schools that come to our office, I've learned to tell our folks that if the kid's on the internet, leave him alone. At least he's sitting down. And we recognize their distractions, and you learn how to work with them. You learn how to talk to them to find what really matters to the individual and how to make sure that they get that experience in what you're doing. You appeal to that's the one thing that I'm really impressed with. There's a sense of more with this generation. They need a reason, and they need to see why what you're doing has an impact. And construction is the one thing that we really do have an impact in people's lives. And when you begin to walk through why this makes sense. We did the STEM high school for Chicago Public School. It was a tough job for our guys. And towards every job starts the same way. You're excited when you start, then you go, what the hell did I get myself into? Then at some point closer to the end, you're saying, please, God, just get me off this thing. I can't stand it. And then you finish it and you go, okay, I'm done. Here's your keys. Please don't call me again. In a couple of years, you go back and go, it's really nice. I'm glad I did that. Right? So we're in the stage of the end where your team is struggling, right? You can see the stress and the toll of just trying to get the job done. And what I usually stress as I walk the job sites at that phase of a project is I remind them what we're doing. And I say, hey, there are 1,400 kids that are going to come to this school every year, 1,400 kids, right? Now, what are the chances of one of them just being great? Like just cures cancer, right? Or just, comes up with a way to stop violence in our community, or just a way to, healthy, affordable food. I said, the chances of one kid just doing an amazing thing is really, really high. And the fact that you were part of that experience and you created that environment that they were, where that for nurturing started. I go, so yes, it's tough. I go, but believe me, yes, you might never hear about this kid, but there is an impact, and you just have to believe it, and you have to keep going.
When did you go from, building projects or, building structures to building people in your company? Like, when did that, like, a pivotal moment essentially that said, like, I am no longer just building stuff. Like I'm building human beings, essentially.
That was probably about a decade ago. So really established into the business when you begin to realize that it doesn't matter how much you pay people. It's just right. You lose people, or you lose people, and you realize, like, why? We gave them a lot of money, right? Or right? And you go, we're working on great jobs. We gave him a lot of money. What does it mean he's not happy, right? Or when during your review time, you're talking to employees, and you sense a sense of not happy. They're not happy, and you go, shit, man, I'm paying you a lot here, right? And then and for me, recognizing that we have to balance that with they have to be happy, right? We have to do our part, right? We have to do our part, making sure that there is happiness and there's a balance, and we're providing that to the best we can. And I wish I can give everybody $1 million that could do it, but that's not practical, right? And how do we balance the person so that they feel seen, because then they project well, and it's still the bottom line, because a great executive, when they talk to an owner is going to have a great experience, and when an owner has a great experience, they're going to come back to you. The unfortunate part of Chicago is full of great contractors. I mean, you hardly hear about a job that didn't finish, right? So we finish everything. So to any owner, you have a choice of where you're going to go build. The question now becomes the experience of building. And if you want an owner to have a great experience in building, the people they work with have to have a great experience in their jobs. So it ties back to the bottom line, which is why I don't understand why some folks look at DEI as an expense. It's an asset. It's on the balance sheet, because when you make your people truly, content and seen, and they have fun with what they're doing, they produce better. And when they produce better, you get more owners. I say, we want to work with you guys, and the experience of working with your people is great. So yeah, when we have a choice, when it's not price, and the value of working with your people is what we always choose.
So let's talk about DEI for a second. I think that's a great topic. What initiatives have you implemented at Ujamaa that promote DEI, diversity, inclusion, and within your team and on the projects?
It's funny, because DEI to us, it's almost the reverse, right? So I'm a Black contractor, and how do I make sure I have DEI in my office? And the funniest thing is, I tell people that Ujamaa Construction is like the United Nations. And I go, we have to be the United Nations, in the sense that every person who work here has got to be able to see a future for themselves, and also that they belong, right? It can't just be a place where the African Americans or the majority or the Hispanics feel belong and the rest of them don't, right? I go, we have to celebrate everybody. We have to celebrate everyone, because we're in the business of building buildings, and we have to build it as a team. And so the coalition that we put together have to function as a team. So my approach is, I go out of my way to make sure everybody feels comfortable. I have to. I think for larger majority contractors, they will struggle, right? It's because you have to. It's not enough to just say I have a DEI manager, or when we have a project in a certain community, we'll use that one contractor. But when we have a project downtown, when it doesn't matter, we're not going to consider him, or we're not going to push, or we're not going to try, and it becomes a DEI is just a thing when we're in certain neighborhoods or when we're interviewing. It sounds great, right? Every owner will tell you, especially any institutional owner, there's always a DEI slide, right? But then when the project starts, you never see that DEI executive again. That's it. It was just it's a thing we do to get a job. And once we get a job, the guys who build a job just builds a job. And I think it's got to be woven into every fabric. And it's not, we shouldn't see it as DEI. It's got to be just equality and normalcy, and just the fact that, right? I mean, you hear about, and I've heard this from some of our service folks in the service. They say, when you're on the other side fighting for our country, nobody says you're African American or you're Hispanic. You're an American, right? So we got to make sure we try to do the same thing, especially in business, because we go after the same businesses that everybody else is doing. We just try to make sure that that we use folks from the community. And I think it's the investment we've had is decade long, right? Is in finding smaller contractors and having them working on small programs. And then as we get bigger, they work on bigger projects. One of the things I've heard multiple times in the city from some of the larger MBs in the cities, they've said, hey, our first large contract was with Ujamaa. And I've always enjoyed that we give people chances. And it's not always worked, right? Sometimes we're given chances and I go, I wish we didn't do that one. but it doesn't stop us from doing it again. I think one of the big challenges we have is you give one, you give a chance to a small business, you give a chance to a diverse firm, you give a chance to a women-owned business, you don't have a good experience, and then all of a sudden he says, I'm not using anybody else, right? I had that one bad experience, that's it. And it shouldn't be the case, because sometimes that bad experience, when you work on it, you actually make sure you don't have another one. And you can actually help the business not create one. I think that's something that we're seeing a decade long struggle in the construction industry, as in we have more people retiring than we have people coming in, because we had, the industry for the most part had given up on certain communities and haven't been, being proactive in going into our public schools, recruiting kids out of high school. So the kids who are thinking about construction is because, somebody in the family is in construction. Right. We're not bringing new talent into the industry, and now we're paying the price.
Let's talk about those challenges when it comes to hiring and even retention in cases. How do you deal with that? Obviously, construction, everybody says that there's a huge hiring problem. Certainly, we're seeing not enough in the workforce there. But if you're also trying to be very deliberate about helping certain communities, like those communities probably have even a bigger problem there of saying, like, there's just not people going into the workforce when it comes to the trades. How are you dealing with that effectively? Solve the hiring problem for construction in the next 3 minutes here, Jimmy.
I think the industry is catching up, and right, a part of it is we're recognizing that, one, we can't be replaced with AI. Right, we can't be. At the end of the day, a bricklayer is still a bricklayer. He's still going to lay 500 bricks in any way, in any shape and fashion you want him to do. So I think our industry is beginning to understand that we have a problem and we have to address it. And the roughness of construction in the past have been misinterpreted in some ways, right? So, right, there's a harshness in construction that it's not personal. It's not racial. That's just the way people talk to each other. Right. And right. I remember 20 years ago, you walked into any construction trailer and we called them girlies. There were girlies all over the place. It was okay. Right. We didn't know any better. Right. And now you can't even say it. We all understand that it was wrong. Right. We just didn't recognize it. And I think we're seeing the same thing in what we're seeing in the industry now. Some of the larger companies are recognizing it, and they're doing some really innovative things. So Power Construction, for example, have gone into the community colleges, and they're hiring associates, right, with a 2-year community college, and they're creating assistant project engineers, right? They're going into high schools, and right. So I don't think there is one large contractor in the city of Chicago that's not very active in recruiting and DEI efforts, right? In the work that they're doing with the high schools, in the work that they're doing with the workforce organizations, in the workforce that they're doing with the advocacy organizations. I think we just have to recognize that it took decades for things to get this bad. And it's not going to take decades for it to get fixed. But as long as we stay consistent in how we're trying to address the problem, that we'll start seeing difference. I mean, I see it now. We have a ridiculous amount of women professionals working with us, and construction wasn't always helpful, right? We started working at 7 o'clock in the morning, which means you got to be there at 6 o'clock in the morning or 6:30 in the morning. And it's really hard for a woman or mother to get the kids to daycare by the time you get to work, right? So you see more companies now starting work at 8. Right. So we're beginning to change our rules and how we work. You're seeing the unions really, really pay attention and going to high schools now and really having a build program. And you're seeing the unions really support workforce development groups to say, okay, this is what we test for. This is what we want to see. And you're seeing a lot of retiring workforce going into those high schools and talking about construction. It's not a myth like it used to be 20 years ago, in which you got in because somebody was there. A lot of our folks are first generation construction people. It's not, right? It was just they went into engineering, they like something about construction, and they're here. we went to Chicago State University, which is right down the street from my office. And 3 out of 4 accountants that we have are from Chicago State, and they're first generation, in construction industry. Now they want to be accountants. They just didn't know about construction accounting as they know now. So we're seeing the industry begin to address that. We just need patience, right? We need to all understand that this is going to take us a little bit more, and to try and not give up on it too quickly.
You had actually mentioned something before. You'd mentioned AI, right? And that bricklayers can't, you're going to need bricklayers, you're going to need some framers, etc., right? So, but obviously you've had to adapt to technology changes, because technology is what helps actually be competitive. It's not just the people, right? So in what ways have technology influenced the way you, let's say, manage projects or your team? And if there's any specific tools or practices you've adopted to stay ahead?
Other than faxing, other than that, maybe something a little newer than that.
No, technology has changed the way we do business in a huge way. Back 20, 30 years ago and before then, every company used to have a bid room or a blueprint room. And that was when you're bidding a job, you got a full set of documents and you live it in your room. And so contractors or subcontractors will go from contractor to contractor and go see what they have in their bid room and do a takeoff right there. So you did a takeoff right there, and right? And that's how you submitted your response. And now it's all electronic now. So nobody comes out of your office. You send out a bid invite to 100 contractors saying, I'm bidding this work. This is how you respond to it. Let me know if you want to. Let me know if you're looking at plans. Let me know if you have questions. And just the whole procurement process is all technology now. And even in the physical space, you walked into any contractor's office back in the day, every desk, you had to have a plan table, right? You had your desk and you had a plan table. It's a fixture of what the industry used to be. You hardly see anybody with a plan table now. It's all on-screen takeoffs. And even on the job site, you see, your superintendents are not walking around with plans anymore. They're walking around with iPads, and they're able to, interact with the iPads with both the office, the subcontractor team, the architects, the engineering team, right off the iPad. So now you have 3D building in which you can actually physically build a building in a virtual world before you go build it in the physical world. So these things are great. Challenging for contractors because the ownership and these are all when you begin to remove the waste and you infuse technology into construction, the savings that are generated are usually captured by the owner. So for contractors, we just get less profitable each year. But technology is here to stay, and it's a really great way to deliver jobs this time. And it's something that we've heavily invested in over the years. And we try to make sure that we're not doing it just because it's the sexy thing to do for the moment, that it actually has an impact on either how we deliver the project or how we procure the project or how we manage the project, that it actually has a real thing. And you ask yourself, what is it there to replace, right? So we were doing it before, doing it one way. So, right, let's make sure we're not doing more just because somebody says, hey, it's the cool way of doing it today.
I like that you said that technology is sexy because me and Will run an IT and cyber company. So that just inherently makes sense that it's sexy. But what safety piece? Right? So obviously safety is huge. Safety is massive in construction. That you had mentioned DEI being a line item that is an investment. We frequently ask the question, is safety a cost or an investment? So maybe we'll start there. How do you see safety in regard to your company and investing?
Oh, safety is definitely an investment. That's another one that's got to be on the, we need to figure out how to capture it on our balance sheet and not on the profit and loss statement. Only because, right, we all have modification factors that are based on our safety rating, based on how many hours and how many injuries you have, how much lost time you have. And institutional investors are going to look at, or institutional clients are going to look at that and say, what's your safety rating? If you're anything over 1, which is the industry standard. It just means that your practice isn't safe. It just means that and for the most part, they don't want to work with you. You can't get into some institutional programs if your safety factor is higher than normal. And so you have to go into those training programs to make sure that one, your workers are safe, and especially in this age of distraction that you see with everybody's still glued to their phones, and the job site is even more hazardous now than it's ever been because nobody's looking down, everybody's stuck on their phones as they navigate the job site mostly. To make sure that you are thinking about people a little bit more than you normally will do. So safety is something that we've invested heavily in. And we continue to get a lot of safety accommodations for having to run a safe work. And also, healthcare is different now. Now, people got hurt, they went back to work 20 years later, nobody know what happened. They just know they got hurt. Now, right, technology can say you got hurt yesterday from doing this, which means if you're not careful, that's your lawsuit now. So you have to be, a lot more careful about what you do and what you have people do. It's not uncommon back in the day to see, right, a laborer overstress themselves, try to pick up something they have no business picking up because they want to show how strong they are because they don't want to be let go when things get slow. Like, they were willing to do anything. Now, that person is the first person you let go now because you will call that reckless, right? I don't want you getting hurt and, us incurring some huge medical bill because you want to prove just how great you are. I mean, so just the thinking about safety is also changing in the industry, and I think it's for the better.
So super interesting how you talk about that. And we can talk more about, where to put on the balance sheet, the financial aspects. So obviously an investment, there's a lot of things that we do in business that doesn't show up as a direct, well, if I do this, it shows up on my P&L, right? It's not a direct, it's an indirect, right? What are other, so like example, like the safety hats, right? There's new standards around safety hats. I think this just came out actually pretty recently. And you can go with the cheap ones, the ones that are $15, or you can go with with sort of the more modern $150 per hat, right? And there's a whole range between the $15 and the $150 ones, right? How do you justify a cost? It's literally 10x, right, of the $15 ones. How would you justify the cost there? How do you look at that and go, well, where's the line?
So I think you justify them by, and it's funny, it still goes back to your balance sheet, in the sense that you only have one chance to lose trust in your employees and they're gone. Just one chance, right? You can only be cheap with them one time. And it doesn't matter how many steak dinners you take them to and how many drinking parties you hosted. If you let them see that you're willing to compromise their safety and you lose their trust once, you're never going to get it back. And unfortunately for our business now, and fortunately for if you're in the recruiting business, all the talent as a contractor, our best talents now come from recruiters. And when you go do a recruiting, you're also sitting there paying 30% of that recruiting fee. So there's actually a real number now for each person you lose, because to replace that talent at that salary point, you're probably going to pay a 30% recruiting fee. Now, when you start getting around and you're running, 100, 200, employees, that's a really, really big cost. I mean, so yes, you can't afford to be cheap on safety, or you can't afford to be cheap on anything, especially when your folks who work for you realize that you don't value their lives, or you don't value them as a person as much as you value yours, or you just a disregard of their trust when they show up to your job, to your place of work every day. You will pay very dearly for that, because not only would they leave, the cost of replacement is huge. So it goes back to your balance sheet. You have to treat people with the most respect and decency you can, or else people have choices these days. Now it's not like, do you know somebody at so-and-so's HR to get a job? You can literally just send an email to HR to a dozen companies, and you'll have 3 interviews by the end of next week.
It's a very different world that we live in, right? Even from an experience perspective, keeping people within the same company, right? The newer generation looks at it as, well, I'm not gaining experience fast enough. I'm going to hop companies. So if I don't have the value here, if I get, quote, bored, unquote, then I could job hop, right? So now you have we'll call it an additional challenge that on top of safety, on top of all the other motivational factors, you now have to consider, well, are we training? Are we continuing to teach our people the right things? Do they have a path? So from that perspective, how are you sort of making sure that employees are on the right path within your company? How are you making sure that they're either trained, they're staying sort of motivated within the company?
So one of the ways I grew the organization over the last 23 years is by doing joint ventures. And I was very selective about who we chose to joint venture with, because what was important for us is we picked companies that were open and willing to share. So I sort of, right, and these were, Chicago is a place in which the average contract is at least 100 years old, at least the large organizations that we have, which has some good opportunities for you to learn from if you were willing to listen and pay attention to, okay, what do you do and how do you keep one person within your organization, for 30, 40 years, and they still have the same excitement as day number one. So within the joint ventures that we've had a chance to see what the engagement program is and the engagement process is and how they moved different folks through their careers. And I think the advantage of multiple joint ventures is we've sort of grabbed the best of what we've noticed and try to incorporate those into where we are. A lot of what we do is centered on our culture. It's a culture of giving, and right. It's not a lot of fancy words. It's not a big quote on the wall. You wouldn't even see it anywhere. But it's just a culture of giving that I try to make sure I show every day in when I show up to the office in the morning all the way to the end of the day, and it's also a culture of caring. You keep talking to people, and there's some openness to how are you feeling. Do you need a break today? Do you need to leave? Take all the time you need before you show up. Don't worry about it. Right? You need a couple of days. Fine, you can have it. And just really caring about the person and being open to what they think they want to do and how they want to do it, and recognizing we're solid medium-sized organization, so we don't have that many people that I can't remember, and I try to make sure that my senior team understand that, and they treat people with that same decency and that same care, and we take that all the way through to our guys in the field. That if somebody says something, it's okay. Let's investigate and see if it's valid, and okay, what can we do about it, right? And even giving a voice to the guys who are going to complain to you all the time, and okay, all right, I heard it, I understand how you feel, but let's see what we can do about it. And I think by having and we've seen that in larger organizations in terms of what we see is this culture of caring about your people should come first before anything else.
Yeah.
Sounds like obviously you've put a lot of thought and intention into culture. We talked about safety, caring, inclusion, actually being impactful in the community. Like all of these things have kind of made a beautiful cake, essentially, of culture, which is amazing. How is that distilled? That do you have a mentorship program? Is it on the leadership to really drive that down through the whole organization? How is that being delivered when somebody starts? They're entering in this culture that exists already, and that they can add to it, they can pull from it. How do you get them to be aligned with what you have built?
We started about 7, 8 years ago, begin to look at leadership teams and making sure that we don't have any silos within the different organization. Mm-hmm. So to make sure that people from HR had a voice in how we ran the company, people from accounting, our guys in the field, our younger engineers, our mid-career guys, our older career guys, to make sure that our leadership team is, we get a voice from everywhere. All right. And then within that team, to encourage people to speak up. Don't hold bad information. There's not, all right. If there's something that you're hearing, is there something that needs to be addressed, to make people feel that they can, at least sound it off, and we can investigate it. And then we can see what else we can do. And then even we actually promoted one of our younger engineers into engagement executive. And our job is to talk to our younger engineers coming out of college. And it was funny because what I realized is I'll run into one of our engineers at the coffee station and I'll say, "Hey, how you doing?" And they say, "Everything is great, Jimmy." And I go, "How you enjoying this experience, this job you're in?" And say, "Oh man, it's perfect." And then I'll hear from somebody else, he hates his job. I go, "But I just asked him." Say, "Yeah, nobody's going to tell you the truth, Jimmy." So fine. So we find somebody else that, okay, if they won't tell us the truth, at least they'll tell somebody that's a little closer in age, closer in personality and background. And let's see if we can understand what those concerns are and find a way to address them. And so it's been helpful having an engagement executive that's talking to especially our younger folks, because you're right. Once they get bored, if you don't do something quickly, you lose.
We even find that at Spot here, right? Where I don't work on the engineering side in any way, shape, or form. And when I have just one-on-one calls with engineers, they will develop, and tell me things that they have not told Will or not told Casey. And it's just a different perspective, so they have a different comfort level. Even though I'm not I'm in your same shoes by any means, but it's interesting how people will open up to different, if it's age, if it's just title, whatever it is, but I think hitting it and being aware that this is a necessity, that we need to understand how they're really feeling, not the top level. Oh, it's great. Oh, I'm really upset. I'm really mad. It's just having that ability to make sure that we are focusing on I actually want to know what you think. I want you to be as candid as possible, even though sometimes that's really difficult when you're talking to either your direct boss or the CEO of the company, right? That can be very difficult to say, "Hey, actually, I think this sucks." That's not an easy conversation to say, "Hey, Jimmy, you built this amazing thing, but there's a giant hole here that is very frustrating to me." I could see how a young person would be certainly intimidated and maybe not be as willing to be open with you in comparison to your engagement officer.
Well, that's true, Justin. I mean, and let's not forget, human nature is selfish in nature, right? So
Yep.
people will always talk about their self-interest. And you have to balance that with, all right, is this good for the company or is this good for you?
Yep.
But you have to, and it's hard. Sometimes you are absolutely hard. You're absolutely right. Now, I usually get those emails late at night, early in the morning, right? Somebody had something on their mind and they had to get it off, and they'll
Yep.
copy me on this email. And there's a few of our guys, I get it every 6 months, right? Okay, all right, there you go. I know, okay, that's him. And but I encourage it. Some of our guys are like, I can't believe he said that. I go, it's perfectly fine. I bet you he feels better now that he said it. So now let's just, I'll show up on the job site. I'll go see him and say, "Hey, how you doing?" And sometimes it's just that. It's the, I am in the middle of a job I can't stand. It's really tough right now and difficult, and I need to lash out at something. And they complain about everything that you're like, "This is terrible and that's terrible. I can't get tools on time, and I wasted an hour, and this is bullshit, and you got to fix that." And you just go, "Okay, I get it. And balancing human nature is sometimes the tougher part of what we have to do, because it's not what they teach you in engineering school. I tell you that much.
Not even a little bit. I could not agree more. The people portion of business is so crucial, and it's not really taught. Even when you go to B school, that's not the part that's taught. It's the X's and O's, not the, "Hey, you're going to deal with a lot of human beings, and those human beings are going to have a lot of different feelings about a lot of different things, and you're going to have to juggle that, and hopefully, make the best decisions in the time that they come up." One of our core values is being candid, and I think that kind of goes to that. Sometimes you just need to get something off your chest. You are going to feel so much more relieved if you just tell me, like, just say it. And like what comes out the other end, if you know that we're not going to be like upset or hurt or those things, because like you're living a company core value, and like we really believe that that's a strong staple of what we do and how we've built. It is very true. Sometimes you just need to get it out, and then once it's out, cool. Like we'll adjust things, and then we can go back to being a happy environment, essentially.
It's funny because I think construction sometimes gets the really, really bad label, especially when you go out and you go out on the job site. I mean, it's supposed to be fearless men and women that do everything right. They walk off the edge. They work hard. They pound away. It's a harsh conversation. It's not gentle at all. And when you walk around job sites now and you hear pleases and excuse me and sir, and you kind of go, wow, this is the construction site of 20 years ago is definitely not the construction site of today.
I definitely agree with you. Just hearing the please and thank you. There were very different words used 20 years ago.
They were
four-letter words. Yes. Okay. So we've talked a lot about kind of a history here. Let's look towards the future. So looking forward, what do you hope to leave as a legacy? What do you hope to leave with Ujamaa? And what are kind of your plans for company's future development?
It's funny because I get this question a lot, right? What? And I go, I don't know yet. I'm still writing it, first of all. So, and the funniest thing is, I was just having this conversation with somebody. I go, hey, it's not any easier now, right? So 23 years, it wasn't any easier now. One of my biggest mentors in the business, believe it or not, and not a lot of conversations, but the right conversations at the right time when I needed it, was Maven Powers with Powers and Sons. And I remembered when they celebrated 50 years in the business a couple of years back, and we were on a pursuit together. And I asked him, I said, hey, does it get easier at 50? I said, okay, you've been building for 50 years. You got to tell me it's getting easier. And he looked at me and he goes, no, it doesn't get any easier. So for me, right, okay, I get it. It's not going to get easier. But I think that we have made it easier for folks who look like me, right, who come from backgrounds that don't represent what construction used to really, fall into 20, 30 years ago, saying, I can be an engineer. And I know what those guys do. And if I wanted to do it, I can do it. If I don't want to do it, I don't have to. But at least I know what that is. And there's an openness to it. And really trying to let people see, especially our younger folks, that the business has so many aspects. It's not just hammers and nails, right? When I go into high school, right, everybody, right, they all want to be into sports, into entertainment, right? Let's call it the sexy industries. And I try to see,
like technology.
No, not technology. I don't get that one. I don't get them that say, no, hey, Justin, I'm not lying to you. I don't get that either. And they don't say engineers, right? So, but to begin to say, hey, depending on what you like doing, there's a part of it that you can still do in our industry, right? So if you like marketing, you can still be marketing. If you like IT, you can still be in IT. If you like, if you like entertainment, you can't be in our business, unfortunately, or sport. But there are things about the industry that can still be part of something you like.
That's well put.
So
that's what I like about it. And I do think that, and I think for me, right, this sense that 50 years from now, I can still point to certain projects that I was part of, and they're still there. In the sense that even when I leave this great big earth, there'll still be an imprint somewhere that I was part of. It's this sense of, I said, it's the sense of living forever. That is our version of eternity, is the fact that we get to touch something that's going to be there way after we live. And if we're lucky enough, somebody gets to tell a story about an interaction with you way beyond your time. And that's enough. That's what eternity is. That's what living forever means, is not only do you affect people around you, somebody gets to tell a story about you. And it's a good one. It's one that it's exciting to hear. And as long as I hope someday somebody tells a story about me that's fun, and somebody says, "Yeah, okay, that's cool."
Don't worry, I'll be telling the story when I had a digital coffee with you for an hour for a very long time, Jimmy. So
There you go.
you got at least one storyteller on your side.
Well, then make it two, because
exactly.
our interactions have always been hilarious. So I definitely appreciate you, Jimmy.
Awesome. We've got one more question for you. Will, let's hear it.
Yeah. Look, I think you've got a lot of wisdom, so I'm really curious about what your answer is going to be. If you were to go back 20 years, what would you tell yourself?
Don't do it.
All right, you're gonna have to expand on that.
That's a very, very difficult question. And the reason why I think it's difficult is everything we go through makes us who we are, right? So every aspect of your experiences is why will you sit here in front of me today, right? If any of them had been different, there is no guarantee that you're the same person sitting in front of me now. So I look at all my experiences as a collection of who I am today. And I think that what I take from that is when I see who I am today, I like what I see. I still look at myself in the mirror and I like what I see. I like who I am as a person. I like what I've done with my last 23 years. And it's not success in terms of look at what I've built. It's just who I've become and what I've been able to do with people I care about and people that I know. And my community as a whole, and I don't know if there's any aspect of my experiences that if I change those, I'll be who I am today.
Great answer. One that I've heard a few times around. This is if I change something, I might not be who I am today. So being very comfortable, being aware, and being very comfortable with who you are today. I like that. So very cool. Thank you.
In fairness, it probably would have been nice to buy some Google stock or Bitcoin.
Oh yeah, I still have bought those things. They're selling books for crying out loud.
Awesome. This has been amazing. Great. It's always wonderful talking to you, Jimmy. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you or Ujamaa, what's the best way for them to do that?
The best way to get a hold of me is by email. I am very, texts and calls. Right now, nobody answers the cell phone number if you don't recognize the number, which is weird because we can thank the telemarketing people for that.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Email is my best way. It's at Akintonde at Ujamaa. It's J and my last name and Ujamaa Construction company information. Emails is the best way, and it's funny because I get more of that. I'll get a LinkedIn, some kid somewhere, it says, "Hey, I just want 5 minutes of your time. I saw your story," and I'll say, "Okay, I'll give you 5 minutes. That's all you're gonna get." Yeah, I will answer questions and I'll give you 5 minutes. Now, beyond that, I'm not giving you anything else. This is not going to be a weekly call, but I will give you that one call.
That's great. Wonderful. Is there anything else you'd like to tell the people before we say our goodbye?
No, thank you guys for letting me tell my story. And thank you guys for letting our industry continue to tell our stories. I think overall wise, we need to make construction look sexy again. And the more stories we tell, the more people see how ordinary we are and what we're doing and the passion that we have for what we do, the better chances. Every kid grew up playing Legos. That's the one thing that somewhere between that, they put the Legos down, they start dribbling basketball, and they never pick it back up again. And only with questions like this and interviews like this do we get our story told so that we can get those kids after they realize that basketball is might not get them to where they are, that maybe playing with Legos just might help.
Oh boy.
Very true.
Oh boy. I may have to that you gave me an idea. I may have to litter my wall with Legos. So thank you for that.
Awesome. Listeners, this was amazing for certainly me and Will. Jimmy seems to be smiling and having a good time as well, so that's always a good thing. I hope you got a whole bunch of nuggets from this. I know we did. And until next time, adios.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for listening to Building Scale. To help us reach even more people, please share this episode with a friend, colleague, or on social media.
Remember, the 3 pillars of scaling a business are people, process, and technology.
And our mission is to help the AEC industry protect itself by making technology easy.
So if you think your company's technology pillar could use some improvement, book a call with us to see how we can help maximize your IT and cybersecurity strategy. Just go to buildingscale.net/help.
And until next time,
Keep building scale.
scale.